Hello, everybody. This is James the Boat on Discovering Season 4, dedicated to original people. And our guest today is Jay Blades. How you doing, brother?
I'm good, man. How you been?
I'm great, man. First of all, let me introduce you. You're a musician. You're a writer. You've done poetry.
Yeah.
You're a DJ. You've been into reggae also.
Yeah.
Dub plates.
Yeah.
Also, you've been all around the States,
Yeah.
touring, doing
Yeah.
music, rapping.
Yeah,
Anything
singing.
else we need to add on? I know you're doing you're doing your masters now, aren't
Yeah,
you?
I've just finished a master's in audio forensics and restoration. Big up LJMU.
Salute.
You know the vibe. But yeah, I've got a long list of things that I've done. You know what I mean?
And you move about a lot, don't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, Liverpool is actually the longest place I've lived ever.
Wow.
Other than Bermuda, it's the longest place I've lived since.
So we start from Jay Blade's timeline now. We're
Yeah.
starting off you're born in Bermuda.
Yeah, born in Bermuda, 1975. 2 years later, there's riots and things there, but it's lots of fun. My
so?
parents, my dad's a Bayesian, Bayesian. My mom was born and raised in Bermuda, and yeah, my dad came up as a teacher, came to Bermuda as a teacher, and then moved on to become part of the government. Worked there. My mother was a teacher for most of her career, and then she moved into education department and started doing curriculum and that sort of thing. So, I grew up in a pretty idyllic life,
Positive growing up for
positive, always positive growing
Yeah.
up. Me and my sister, we never needed anything. We never had to, obviously, everybody wanted the latest toys and things. I never really got those, but we got the next level down. So it's like, oh, you got the Lego, we might got Fago, but I say Lego. Lego is a bad idea because my parents always gave me Lego. They always.
Now, when we think of Bermuda, people might think different things. Some people just think island paradise. Some people might see it as, from the history of the transatlantic
Yeah.
or what's going on today. I mean, give us a little rundown on Bermuda,
As the song says, there's a famous song in Bermuda called "Bermuda is Another World," and it's a very strange place in the sense of it's tiny, and because it's tiny, everything happens, close to you. You know what I mean? So I was gonna say to you before, like, it's one of the only places I know where you could run into your local politicians, on a daily basis, just because it's so small. Everybody's got to go to the grocery store. Everybody's got to go get gas. You can run into people, and this is part of the specialness of what Bermuda was for me growing up. It's the fact that if I was having problems in school, obviously me is a little bit different because my mother taught at the high school I went to, which is another story. But so because she taught there, or if my mother didn't teach there, you could run into, if your child was having problems with math, you could run into your child's math teacher just randomly somewhere, because we all grew up in the same place, and half of the time your parents know the teacher from school, from youth group, from church, whatever. You always know the people that are involved in the upbringing. So that whole takes a village to raise a child thing, when I was growing up, it was very much enforced, not even on purpose.
Sound like a great community, though.
And as I said,
the time.
This obviously, we all look back with rose-tinted glasses. Obviously, there were other issues, and my particular situation wasn't everybody's situation, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But then there are things like, I've had the same friends since I was about 3 years old, you know what I mean? Because even if they moved away, they're only moving no more than 20 miles away, and you probably still end up at the same school anyway, because there's only so many schools and those sorts of things. So, I've had my friends all the way through. So that development of bonds and tightness
don't go away.
It doesn't go away, and it's something that, like, for instance, my son lives in Wolverhampton. He's never really gonna have that. He'll have friends like that, but if they move to Brighton or wherever way down south, he may never really see them again. Obviously, there's technology and stuff, but he might never see them again, because they're really so far away. In Bermuda, we didn't have that. So the people that I know, the people that I've seen, they're still in my life and continue to be in my life in whatever way it means. You know what I mean?
True supporters,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and then
supporters, and
yeah,
then just people
good
that,
people.
yeah,
Yeah,
people you can just chat to, and and those relationships don't go away. As even if we don't speak every day or every month or whatever, it's like when I go home, it's like, hey, it's the same people that I've known. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Well, interesting anyway. I
yeah,
mean, that's you got growing up in the sun as well, a hot country as well. That's another thing.
bruh,
Because
these are things that we as a people seem to forget. It's like the sun is so important. and and
yeah,
and as a person who grew up in the sun and even went to university in the sun, when I first went to university, I went to Florida. um I didn't really recognize the impact that that sunlight had on me as a person until I moved to England and the sun started setting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon,
yeah.
and I'm still will never be used to that. And it's a very strange thing.
Also, the food you're eating, the fresh fish you're getting in
Yeah,
Bermuda,
like,
and other things.
and
Vegetables.
these are older things. As I said, I mean, when I was growing up, things are a lot different now because we've had the financial crashes, we've had the Panama Papers and whatever else. So things are being affected in Bermuda. But when I was growing up, it was boom time. You know what I mean? So there were people struggling. Don't get me wrong. As I said, my upbringing wasn't everybody's, but you know, you could go down to the dock at that time and just buy fish from the fisherman who just come back. You can go to I remember getting fresh meat from an abattoir once, and that was the best thing I've ever eaten. However, the vast majority of food is imported from the States.
Wow,
So
yeah.
yeah, so that there's a
Okay.
problem with that.
That's a problem.
It is a problem.
Is this a recent thing?
No, this has always really been because there's Bermuda's volcanic island. We don't have a lot of space to grow enough agriculture to. Well, we do now because of advances in agriculture. Let's not get that twisted. But at the time, there were certain things that were grown on the island, and you could get them. But the vast majority of things, grapes and whatever else you
Yeah.
wanted to eat, is imported. So that's creating a problem now because things are extremely expensive in Bermuda right now, and it's causing major issues with people. So a lot of Bermudians are now moving here, which is another thing that could be a bit of an issue. For
When
the
it
island.
comes, when like, say you could be in Jamaica, places like that. A lot of people who have family there and they buy land or they own the land.
Yeah.
Is land expensive in Bermuda?
Land is very, very expensive in Bermuda, and
Is that like since in the last
it's
20,
always,
30 years or something?
It's
Or
always pretty much been expensive.
Okay.
Supply and demand, that type of thing. Things have always been inflated in price in Bermuda. However, again, when I was younger, work was available. You know what I mean? Waiters were making a very good wage working in hotels and that sort of thing. You could go and work for the exempt companies and make stupid amounts of money. There's Bermudians. There are a lot of Bermudian lawyers. There are a lot of Bermudian accountants, and so you can make a lot of money doing that. However, and so the wages were on par with the pricing at that time.
Right.
But of late, jobs have become fewer, and the wages for those jobs have pretty much stagnated. Much like literally everywhere else, as we were saying before, the struggle is universal at this point.
Definitely.
So, so there are a lot of Bermudians who can't afford to live in Bermuda. I saw a 2-bedroom flat, 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom. I think it was $4,500 a month, which would
Wow.
be call it about $3,000 a month. You know what I mean? And it was a nice one. Don't get me wrong; it was nice, but
That price though.
but it's $3,000 a month. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Then,
so for me, when I came here and I was like, oh, but then, there's other bills that we don't have. Like we don't have, central heating. We don't have sewage and all of them types of things. Water is collected from the roof. Mostly we have piped water now, but you don't have to use it. So there are trade-offs for sure. But as I said, I mean, there are many, many Bermudians, up to a a nice a general estimate. It's at least 4,000, probably up to 7, of a population of 70,000 people.
Now, I understand, like, when you're saying some Bermudans having to leave Bermuda,
Yep.
but when people leave, you have people who come in.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
even though maybe one leaves, maybe two come in. I don't know how it works.
Well,
You know,
I mean, that's one thing. Again, Bermuda's been, as much as we're a colony, we've had self-determination.
yeah,
We haven't had real interference from England, well, Britain, the British government, as much as some other places might have. There was actually one of the colonies their government was taken over by the English government because there was some sort of corruption thing going on. Corruption, we'll call it that, because I didn't really read into it too much. But so we've always had self-determination. So we've always set our own immigration policies. So for the longest time, like, as I said, my dad is from Barbados. So when you come to Bermuda, you have to have a job already, uh, or you have to be married to a Bermudian.
okay.
So, but when you come in, you have to decide, well, at the time you had to decide, do you want to get naturalized and become Bermudian, or are you going to keep your own passport and work with the work permit system, which has always been a bit complicated. And as with everything in politics in every country, if you know somebody, you get a little bit better treatment.
Definitely.
You know what I mean?
What is the population of Bermuda?
At the moment, it's probably approximately 70,000.
70,000. Oh,
Yeah,
it's not a lot.
no, it's not a lot. Of that, it's call it about 60% black, and we'll say 40% other, which will include white, it will include Filipinos. We have a lot of Filipinos at the moment. It'll include Indians. We have a few Indians there. And we actually have some Chinese, I can never say the word, the Chinese Muslims that are being persecuted at the moment.
The Uyghurs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, which is an interesting story.
Very interesting.
Where
Yeah.
we got them during Obama's term. Bermuda was being looked at very, very seriously by the American government, as with every government, because of our tax exemption laws and whatever. So they were going to do something. Our then premier, Dr. Ewart Brown, who I'm going to let you Google him and see what you come up with, made a deal with Obama that there were some of these guys that were in Guantanamo, and obviously they were trying to get everybody out of Guantanamo, so they couldn't go back to China because obviously they're being persecuted already. They're going to get even worse when they go back. So, and they couldn't come to the States because the American government wasn't going to let that happen.
Okay.
So we took them. I think there were 7, and they settled in Bermuda. Some of them are married now, doing what they're doing. And what that did was that a lot of people didn't really see was all of a sudden America wasn't talking about Bermuda's economic situation. You know what I mean? It was like, we took these guys and then everything was like, all right, we'll leave you alone for a while.
Yeah.
So we have some of those. Our population is vast, is mostly made up of, like, the black population is mostly made up of West Indians, people of West Indian descent, we'll call it, or say West Indian. What am I talking about? That area, Caribbean down there. So as I said, my family's Bayesian. A lot of St. Lucians, a lot of Catitians, those sorts of groups came up to do work because they were all colonies at the time, to do work on our dockyard, which is where the British Navy had made themselves.
Now, when I listen to what you said about Bermuda, population 70,000, when I'm hearing about a lot of Bermudans have to leave Bermuda.
Yep.
Because of obviously it's too expensive to stay.
Yeah.
The new people that come in, I don't necessarily mean people from the Caribbean, neighborhood countries. I'm talking about whether it's China, Philippines, United States,
so
whatever. To basically, because I seem to see this everywhere, where people get absorbed.
Yep.
And the time we're in now, 222, you only have to look maybe down the line at like 250. When I say that, because you look back at your time. Yeah. How it was when you were young to how it is now.
Exactly. And these are the things that are very interesting. I remember there was a girl who was in primary 1, so she would have been 5, and I was about 12. And she was, full on Filipino little girl. And one thing about Bermuda is once you're there and you grew up there, you're one of us in that sense. There's obviously our separations and
Yeah.
whatever, and there's the economic separation and there's all the other separations. But as a general rule, you're Bermudian. It's cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Much more so now. Like even the difference between that, like when I was growing up and now, I went to a school called the Berkeley Institute. It was the first integrated high school in Bermuda, and which translates to the first black high school, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Black academic high school.
Yeah.
However, even when I graduated in 1992, which is 30 years ago now. Jesus.
Wow.
So I graduated in 1992, and there were 2 white people in my high school in my year for sure. And what we were talking about before, I was saying that in Bermuda we have this separation of white people almost. We have the white people, and then we have the Portuguese people who obviously are still Caucasian, if we want to call it that.
Okay.
But because they were kind of like the Mexicans in the States.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Or the Indians here, or you know what I mean? Like
basically the less than the white Europeans.
Exactly.
If
So
you're not
they're-
from Portugal,
Right.
England, or
yeah,
wherever you're
and
from.
they call themselves Portuguese, but most of them are from the Azores, which is a colony of Portugal, which is another interesting little tidbit of how that relationship works.
Well, they got about them Portuguese, and they were on it earlier than the Spanish and the rest of them.
Exactly. We all know that, but it's just interesting how the people we call them Portuguese, but they're Azorians. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So those people mostly stuck to themselves, much like the Mexicans would do in the stereotypical way
Yeah.
the Mexicans do in the States. Only spoke their own language, and only in the last 15, 20 years has Portuguese become the second language of Bermuda. It was always English, and
Wow.
you couldn't see Portuguese anywhere. We don't learn Portuguese in school, none of that.
It's only really Brazil that I thought was Portuguese speaking in
Right,
around that hemisphere.
and there isn't there's a large enough population of these people in Bermuda,
yeah.
but it's not massive. You know what I mean? It's not, so, and then we still have the families of the original settlers that live in Bermuda. And these people, as you might imagine, they own most of everything.
Another thing, what I definitely have to ask you about, maybe they ain't none left, or maybe they're in the blood of the modern human beings now.
Yeah.
The indigenous peoples, original peoples of Bermuda. So when we say, the whole Americas, when we say the Americas, South America, Mexico, and any traces of them, or is it in the blood of some of the descendants?
These are the things that personally I'm not quite sure of.
Okay.
The history that we were taught was there was nobody in Bermuda, because it is like 24 square miles, little rock in the middle of the ocean. It was called the Devil's Isles, which is why the Bermuda Triangle is named after Bermuda, is because they've been sailing past Bermuda for hundreds of years, and because Bermuda's shape, we're on 3 volcanoes, supposedly extinct, but who knows really. So there's a lot of reef work around Bermuda. So there were a lot of shipwrecks. Actually, the name Bermuda comes from Juan de Bermudez, who we've recently discovered it was Portuguese, and he got shipwrecked there. And he carved his name into a rock. We used to think he was Spanish, but,
Yeah.
it's history, right? So so there were animals that would be on the ships that would make their way to land. And so imagine you're in this, 16th century sailing past this black, dark place, and all you can hear is pigs squealing and birds and all sorts of. So they called it the Devil's Isles. They didn't know what was going on over there. They didn't want to know. You know what I mean? So whether there were people there or not, I can't say for sure. There are people doing research trying to find that out for sure, but I couldn't say. I'm not.
Of course. But anyway, let's talk about some of the music you've done.
Well,
you've done a lot of music, acting. So let's deal with some music first.
yeah, let's deal with the art.
So
Let's
we
deal
dealing
with
with the reggae first, or we dealing
Well-
with other music first? You've dabbled into many things.
It all melds together. This is the thing about that. In my later age of start to, it all kind of folds together into itself. So again, like I've had the same friends since I was 3 years old, whatever. So one of those friends, we started a sound system back in 1994 or 5, something like that. So reggae sound system, dub plates, all of those sorts of things. But I was already in university, so I wasn't as involved. But because that's my brother,
reggae is big in Bermuda.
Reggae has always been big in Bermuda because of that Caribbean link mostly.
Okay.
It's funny because calypso and soca is now becoming really big in Bermuda, and I remember being young, and the only time you heard that was one time a year in August when we have our big national holiday, and that was it. After that and before that, just reggae. Hip hop wasn't even that big when I was up until I was out of high school. I was one of me and my friends were big into hip hop from the beginning. Big up Scott. Scott is I call him my cousin. We're not really related, but he's my cousin.
Who were the artists you listened to? The hip hop artists growing up?
The very first group that I listened to was Houdini. Very first tape that my friend Scott gave to me was Houdini, and he gave me something else. But that Houdini album, with friends and all that, that was the tune. I used to call and try and request it on the radio, all them types of things. And so I was listening to that, and this is again a credit to my mother who would listen to what I was listening to. And she was like, "You need to give that tape back to him because it had too much language on it for me." I was about 10 or something.
Oh, okay.
So I was too young, but I was hooked from then.
Yeah.
So after that, I had the Beastie Boys album, Paul's Boutique. I had my very first CD I bought was the Juice soundtrack.
Okay.
And then, I still got that CD somewhere. So early Tupac. My cousins all lived in New York and Brooklyn, so. Biggie, all of that type of stuff. New York hip hop was me. I wasn't really a big fan of Tupac as a rapper. People will be mad at me for that, but that's cool. But I recognize his worth as an artist overall, and
he was more of a poet, Tupac.
Yeah, and an actor, really.
And an actor, and activist, and many things. Really,
he was many things, and that's one thing that
I think Pac, because I mean. It's exactly a disputed thing because I think Nas is my favorite MC, but Pac is the best writer. He's the best, and I love how he sounds and everything.
Yeah,
but when it comes to lyrics, it's a little different than being a rapper, just a rapper.
This is the thing,
a poet,
and that's the thing I find with Pac. Pac was an artist.
Yeah,
he went to an art school. You know what I mean?
True artist.
He was a true artist. So for me. I was, it
didn't even have to be hip hop. He could have even done something else.
He could have done whatever he did, and that was the thing that I was looking for. Like, the thing. What was that movie he did with? Was it Roth? When they were heroin addicts. The last, like that. Yeah. So that movie showed me.
I'm trying to think. I know which one you mean. I think,
but that movie showed me what he could have been.
Yeah,
I mean, there was Juice, there was Poetic Justice, there was all that, but that was like, that was niche, black people art, black hip hop movies. But that movie showed me that, that guy he's gonna be the guy. Rapping is just another thing he does. You know what I mean? So, but as I said, for me, I was strictly East Coast for the most part. And then I went to Florida.
Right, okay.
Right.
Now that must have been a different experience going to Florida.
Well, and this is what I say to people. I mean, people think of Florida, they think of Miami, they think of Disney, and that's not where I was. You know what I mean? I was in a little tiny place called St. Leo, Florida, which was about 30 miles outside of Tampa. And as I said, the people at my university, there were about 20 black people at my university out of maybe 1,000, 2,000, something like that. So we all, as people do, you gravitate to, what you feel is closest to you, right? So that's where I learned all my booty music, all my Miami bass, all of that southern drawl hip hop, like,
And it's funny you say that, because we were saying before, a lot of people don't look at Florida as the South.
Exactly. Florida is the South. Don't get it twisted. You have your, shining places. As I said, there's the two streets in Miami, and then there's Disney and all of that. And yes, there's beaches and sun and whatever else. But, you have to understand that Florida is the South. So the people of Florida are just like the people of Mississippi.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They are just like the Alabamas and all them sorts of things. Once you get away from the commercial sides of
stuff like
exactly.
that.
So you get, I remember being in a car. Our car was really small, and looked out the window. All I saw was a wheel. Looked up a little bit further, you see the gun rack with the Confederate flag in the background, and you're just like, all right, I'm just roll up the windows and just, because you didn't know what could happen. We had our little scuffles here and there, but that's, as I said, I mean, in the travels that I've had, I've learned that all of that happens everywhere. You know what I mean?
So you've been around many states in America. I know you say you've been to Canada as well. So which one of them out of the states is you like the most? And
in the States?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You spent a bit of time there, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just thinking of which state. Like, I mean, I like New York, but New York it's not the state that I'm talking about when I think of New York. It's the city, right? So it's nice in New York. I've got a lot of family there, so that makes me a little bit biased. Atlanta was a completely different experience. It's just like, I really did like Atlanta, but for different reasons. You know what I mean? The party scene in Atlanta was amazing. And that was the first place in the States where I saw that many black people.
They call it Chocolate City.
Yeah, they called, and it was early times of this was before Tyler Perry was down there, and this was the beginnings of that real solid looking at Atlanta as a place for especially black art.
Wow.
So it was, you looked at it and you're like, wow, this is crazy. You know what I mean?
Another place as well, you probably ventured down there, New Orleans.
I never went.
You didn't go down that part?
Never got there. I always wanted to go to Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
My mother went, which is hilarious. But I never got to Louisiana. I did a lot of the Midwestern states, and a lot of the northern states. So,
do you ever go through like Chicago?
Yeah, been to Chicago. Chicago was, but then, as I said, I mean, because of how I did this traveling, I was with a different part of Chicago people, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I didn't see the hood Chicago.
Of course.
You know what I mean? I didn't see that dark side of Chicago. I've been to Detroit, never really saw that dark side of Detroit either. But I saw, like, Chicago was just, the city itself is an amazing looking city. The architecture is really cool. The fact that there's that river, and when we went there, it was not long after St. Patrick's Day, so it was still green and all of that. It was like, this is really weird. And then I'd never seen a lake as big as Lake Erie. Like, it's an ocean to itself. Like, you can't see the other side of it. The other side of it is Canada. It's massive. So coming from this little tiny place, this is what I was taking in. You know what I mean? It's taken in. I come from somewhere that people might call idyllic, but I'd never seen things like this. You know what I mean? I'd never seen, like, this travel I did with a group called Up With People. We went to little tiny places. So when we went to, not St. Louis, Missouri, or Missouri, as the people that I was staying with would call it. I'd never seen fields as big as that. We stayed with this lady in her house, and we looked out her kitchen window, and I was like, oh, how much of this land is yours? It's like, as far as you can see, all around the house. And I'm like, I can't imagine that much land belonging to one person. You know what I mean? It's just...
And also, when people mention America, it opens up my mind on sports.
Yeah.
Because the sports opportunities in UK, I don't hear people talking about baseball,
Yeah.
American football,
And
certain other sports. That I mean, we have them in, but it's not
yeah,
really.
it's not big things.
talking terms.
Like, because and that's one thing that I
Did you ever join anything like? Was you into the sport like baseball and?
I baseball bored me.
There's
to tears.
basketball.
Basketball. I would watch basketball. I'd watch American football.
Yeah.
I went to a hockey game once in Florida. That was quite interesting. But what I discovered about sport, the difference in sports here and there is sports here is still sport. Sport there is a spectacle. It's a business, and that's all it is, really, in my opinion.
Okay.
It's, so things like, people look at things like the NFL and whatever else, and I'm like, and English people are like, I don't understand how this game works. I'm like, you're looking at it in the wrong way. You're looking at it as still a sport. Don't look at it as a sport. Look at it as a spectacle, and understand that this is entertainment for the people. These are modern day gladiators. That's what they are. If you look at it from that perspective, it makes a little bit more sense.
Definitely.
Because, the rules don't really make sense. It's like, go 5 yards, stop. Go 5 yards, stop. Go, it's and people don't understand how that's interesting. But it's like, once you look at all the other things around it, the fact that the pundits can pull out stats that are just ridiculous. And like, yeah, last time it rained on a Tuesday and they played together, they lost. Who knows that type of stuff?
Yeah, of
but
course.
this is all part of the spectacle and the entertainment of what this sport is. It's distraction, really, in its
of course.
in its finest form.
Definitely.
Whereas football here is still, as much as it is massive business, it's still looked at by the masses as still community, still cultural, still we're together. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of a different way to look at these things.
Also, when I listen to the accents of people from Bermuda, they sound like they're from the United States. I mean, I don't really get onto this in Jamaica or Trinidad and certain other places. Yeah. And also, you being an actor, also, well, let's get into that. Also, so where did you begin with the acting? Also, what did you
these
play a part in?
These are the things with being in Bermuda. Because it's so small, you have the opportunity, I had the opportunity to do all of those things from young. Every school play, the group I was in, Up With People, was traveling musical, basically. Then before that, there was another group called Youth to Youth, and there were all these skits and things like that. So I got this little bug there. I've not gotten too deep into it because, as I said, I mean, for me, I don't. I have a problem sometimes where I don't think far enough ahead. So I could have gotten further into acting, and then when I came to England, I started doing background work, that sort of thing. And our brother Chase he was asking me if I could be in this play, and I just I don't think I'm there yet. And part of my personal issue is that I always know that there's somebody better. You know what I mean? Whereas many people will be like, yeah, there's somebody better, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah,
I'm that guy that's like, look, this would be a great opportunity for that guy over there.
Right.
You know what I mean? And sometimes it causes me a problem. Sometimes it doesn't. But I always feel comfortable in that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I've got a really good friend. His name is Darren Herbert. Big up, Darren. I gotta mention my people. I always have to do that. Darren is the actor in our clique. Our little group of friends. Darren is the guy. He's been in several movies. He's gotten awards for his musical work in Canada, in Toronto, in Canada. He's currently in what's it called? I feel ashamed that I didn't remember the name of this. But he's in a couple series on Netflix. And like Darren, I like to he represents in those things. His accent isn't quite American. So going back to the accent thing, if you speak to 5 different Bermudians, you'll get 5 different accents. This is the reality of the situation. My accent is the way it is because when I went to Florida, I kind of took on more of an American twang. Okay. And as I said, because I was always listening to hip hop, so all of that kind of seeped into my accent. However, guys who didn't get into that, they lean more towards Caribbean accents, as I
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
with the sound systems and things, guys have always got the faux Jamaican accent on and whatever else, which is changing at the moment. There's a lot more, and this is another thing. Uh, Growing up has done for me. Like, and I mean, growing up is getting to the age that I've gotten. Um, I've got more. I've gotten more comfortable with my background and my history, and I've gotten more comfortable with where I'm from and who I'm from. So I've begun to just do anything I can do to help the people that I know from my places. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, for as I said, for the accent, my accent is never really, I don't feel it's changed. But when I go home, they tell me I have an English accent. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But when I go to the States, they think I'm American. They think I'm English. When I come here, they all think I'm American. So it's
Yeah, yeah.
so I've gotten to the point where I'm just like, you know what? This is the way I speak. It represents exactly what my upbringing is. I come from Bermuda, which is 500 miles from the nearest point to the States. We're still an English colony, populated by mostly West Indians. So my accent
Yeah,
takes
yeah,
into
yeah.
account all of those
All of
things,
them.
and the fact that I live here. So
Well, anyway, last time you were on this show, anyway, it was we were giving a tribute to Dr. Renoka Rashidi.
yeah,
He passed away last August, and I remember that was the first time on Discovering. But you only had like a little bit to say, and so forth. So get you on and
Yeah.
speak about a bit more about learn about yourself. Also, speaking of Renoka Rashidi and people like that, the whole point is the importance of African history,
yeah.
which we don't seem to learn a lot. I'm sure yourself, but
Yeah.
you coming from Bermuda, when you're growing up, I mean, what do you know about Africa? And is there anyone or any kind of like schools or any kind of where the knowledge is kept
Well,
or workshops?
this is
and
the other thing.
anything?
So I can okay. I'll put the strict education thing just to the side for a second. But what Bermuda provided for me, as I said, my mom was born in the 40s, so the vast majority of her upbringing was in the 60s. During
Yeah.
a lot of the struggles. Now, as I said, in Bermuda, it's very tiny. So my link to a lot of people, so a lot of the people who did a lot of the work in Bermuda for civil rights and those sorts of things are people that my mother went to school with, are people that I was seeing on a daily basis, like the Maxwells. Dr. Maxwell was my high school principal, but he was also somebody who my mother knew very well. Um, then there was his wife, who's a very prominent writer who I would see every time I went to the library because she worked in the library. She wrote a very good book called Girl Caught, which was about the female people who were involved in these situations in the 60s and whatever. So what Bermuda provided for me was connection directly to those people. And so I wasn't getting information from books necessarily. I was speaking to people who were involved. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And there are other people. Obviously, there are more people, and other friends of mine have been directly speaking to those people. Like my friend VJ, who wrote a very good book, who writes a lot of poetry as well. And then there's I'm not going to say his name because he's changed his name, and I don't want to use his old name. But there are many Bermudian scholars who were able to speak directly to the people who were involved in those things and write about them. So, and then because I'm the same age as them, I might not necessarily read their book, but I'm talking to them. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So my education on Pan Africanism and what our struggle as people is comes direct from people that were involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I like that point you just made then about you don't have to always read a book. It does help to know particular to go in depth, but it does help when you've got people in your neighborhood who already are quite clued up anyway. And like you said, Bermuda's small. You can all share that information fast.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know too much about Bermuda, but I'm aware of other Caribbean Pan-African movements.
Right. And there were Pan-African movements in Bermuda. There was there was a type of Black Panther Party. I can, I can, all of the things are spilling out of my head.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
disappeared.
Backtracking.
But there are so many. There are a lot of those people, and again, the people who were involved in that. Some of them are still alive now, and some of them were alive when I was younger. So I had this access to those people. I might not even have known that they were involved in that, but they will tell me stuff. And I'll tell you like a one story about one of my mother's best friends, and it's a music story, but it'll give you an idea of what I mean about how the connections work. So when I was in primary school, I had to do a project on somebody. I chose Bob Marley just because at the time I'm like, oh, I do Bob Marley. And my mother says to me, oh, you should speak to your Uncle Reynold. And I'm like, okay. I knew my Uncle Reynold was a singer. I knew he had a couple albums out. I knew he used to sing with In a Circle, I think it was, which is, big Jamaican reggae band. And, I knew all of that, but I'm like, okay, what's he going to tell me that I can't find in some book somewhere? Because this is pre-internet, people, pre-internet. All right. So, and my mother, it's just the other thing. My parents actually met in Jamaica at University of the West Indies. So they were in Jamaica when reggae started. So, I could speak to them directly about, what was it like? And my mother tells me this story about she was at the bottom of a hill and the dance was at the top of the hill, and all you could hear was the bass line rolling off the top of the hill, and it was Stir It Up, doom, 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 and she could just hear it coming. So those types of things were already in my head. So my mother telling me, go and speak to Uncle Reynold. I'm like, okay, cool. So we go over to his house and he tells me he's like, oh yeah, Bob used to do this. Bob used to do that. This is what Bob used to do. And I'm like, cool, writing it all down as diligent student I was. And then we left and I'm in the car with my mom. I'm like, what? Why did he talk about Bob Marley like he knew him? And he's like, oh, because he did. He used to do shows with him. And I was like, of course he did. But these are the close connections of people that we have in Bermuda that I think sometimes we as Bermudians forget that we have this power of spreading information really quickly because we're close. But also, I'm sure you've heard of Collybuds. I'm sure you've heard but there's so many other musicians and writers.
That's another way actually to learn. People have learned history also through musicians.
Exactly.
Big parts.
Entertainment. Entertainment will teach you.
Yeah.
If you let it, it will teach you.
If you let it.
Yeah.
That's right. That it is. And also, one of the main themes, we talk about is this whole season 4 dedicated to original peoples. Yeah. And when we say original peoples, first peoples, and also the first peoples to migrate anywhere on this planet, you find them. Always black people, no matter where we are. But also another word for, because I like to see people's understanding of when I say these things.
Yeah.
So when I'm saying original people to you, Jay, rather than just saying black people, or just using the word African people, I'm dealing with the beginning because the word Africa, some people say it came from outside.
Exactly. Yeah.
Also the word black, it's also given to us by the English.
Yeah.
More's given to us by the Spanish.
Yeah.
And we can go on forever.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
What we call ourselves, that's the whole point why I've said original people. Because I'm trying to find, what is the oldest words we can find ourselves?
Yeah.
And when I seen a tribe in Malaysia, the oldest people, they're actually called Orange Asli, which means original people or first peoples.
Yeah.
So I'm just connecting to something which is, something positive, not negative, because we take on these words and there's a lot of negativity with it.
There is, yeah. And for me, and I say we as a people.
And there's a lot of wordplay to all this stuff as well.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying?
But, we as a people, if I look into what I am, there's a lot. There's not just African, Caribbean. I'm sure there's some Chinese in there somewhere. If you look at my mom, her eyes a little bit, iffy. And, there's the Arawaks. There's all of those native people that were in Barbados because my mother is actually half Bajan. So there's that. So I've stopped really thinking about what we should call ourselves. We have names, you know what I mean? It's what I say to non to non-brown people. It's like if you don't know what to call somebody, like, oh, if you're trying to describe a group of people who are all wearing the same clothes, like, it's the black guy. Either call him by his name ask them what their name is,
Yeah.
and call them by their name, because that's at the end of the day, if we want complete equality, that's what it is. We're not gonna want to be and for me, I don't mind being described as black in those types of situations where I might be the only black person in the room. Yeah, call me the black guy, because it cuts out on all sorts of other things, and it's easy, and I don't have that. And again, that's something that I get from growing up surrounded by people who look like me and know me.
Because I think what it is funny enough. Where'd you come from? The Caribbean. See, I'm African and Caribbean. Yeah. So I can see both sides.
Yeah.
I know African, it's about lineage.
Yeah.
It's about lineage. Okay. I'm not playing into tribalism, but I know me tribe.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I favor, that's just where we're from.
But that's exactly what I'm saying.
And it's just basically a certain culture that this tribe has. They're very similar to the other tribes who are right by them, who might call themselves something else.
Exactly.
But I'm looking for what's similar than what's different.
And that's the same that's the one thing that I've learned.
But the Caribbean side, if I could explain the Trinidad side of me, it's very similar to what you said, because when you're saying about many different ethnicities in a country, Trinidad, wow. You can have Indians, you can have the Arawaks, you can have
Chinese.
The Chinese. Spanish
and
descendants.
And a mix of all of them.
Yeah. And then, that's why you see a lot of Trinidadians. You have Lucis hair a bit.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is the thing with the Caribbean. It's like when I analyze the Caribbean, I can't point to a particular place in Africa. I can't. I mean, some people say, some Trinidadians were took from Nigeria. Yeah. Some might have been took from other parts of Africa. Yeah. But that's why with Nigeria, it's easier for me. I have my Nigerian name. Names mean things. Yep. I have me location, me village, me tribe. So because all that, that was the route I went. Even though I don't ignore the Trinidad, what it is, it's a bit of a question mark.
Yeah, because at the time, there's no record. And that's where the problem lies. So for me, all of my history is already on this side. Yeah. So there's only so far back I can go. So I had to make a decision personally, how far do I need to go back? You know what I mean? I know that somewhere in my history, there's somebody who was born in Africa and then either moved or, whatever happened. So for me, it is connecting to what my family is. My family, this is another thing about Bermuda. There are all shades of black Bermudians. When I say all shades, I mean one of my cousins, and she's not, I don't know how close of a cousin it is, again, because there's adoption and all sorts of things that's going on in our family tree. But, she looks like Snow White. She's got dark hair, and it's, as you said, loose and open curls. Her skin is paler than some white people that I know. Yeah. But that's my cousin. You know what I mean? Yeah. No matter what. Yeah. And that's growing up in that. There's a group of people in Bermuda that are from a specific section called St. David's Island. Now, St. David's Island is where Native Americans were forced to settle when they were brought over to do pearl diving and whatever else they were doing, because they were brought as slaves as well. Yeah. So Pequot, I think is the name of their tribe, and they've just made link back to that tribe. Now, those people, they're black people, you know what I mean? Yeah. But when you look at them, sometimes if an English person looked at some of these people, they would call them white. Okay. And they would be highly upset, as I am actually black. Yeah. This is my mother, who is darker than me. Do you see what I mean? So I've growing up in that has shown me that attaching too much to a skin tone and B exact, you should know your history, but attaching too much to it sometimes can cause you more issue than is necessary. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Nigerian side is, because I'm able to see it clearly. Right. It's not visible. So, and then, like I say, I still connect to the whole of Africa. Yeah. Even though there's many different places, I connect to it because of what has happened to the transatlantic slave trade through that, and also through colonialism. Right. So I will try to, connect with this whole motherland I can see. And even when I visited places, even when I've been in the South Pacific, people in Hawaii, people in Fiji, calling Africa the land of the gods. And do you see what I mean?
So their interpretation of Africa is different than what just an average European says. But we get fed the European,
and this is one of the other things.
Like, we don't have like a thing there where let's see what different people have their story of Africa.
And you asked me before, like, what education did I get? Yeah. And as I said, I went to a pretty much all black high school, which most of the high schools in Bermuda were all black because, as I said, we're mostly black people. Yeah. At the time. So, but we didn't get a lot of that directly from school because we were still under English system. So we had to learn, I did GCSEs. I did GCs. So, we had to do all the English history and World War II and all of that. We
crap.
did.
Well, still history.
I say crap, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
we didn't do anything specific to ourselves. But as I said, because the island is small and the school was the biggest school in the island, it was 500 people. Do you see what I mean? So even the school felt like family. So we had these other ways of educating ourselves, and it was through that school. So there's people like Dr. David Chapman, who lives in South London now, who were in high school with me. And so I can have chats with these guys who are extremely knowledgeable. Right now, I mean, if you want to have a Google of Dr. Chapman's podcasts and things, at the moment his main focus is growing food. So he's been growing food for his entire family in his South London allotment, but would we have had that opportunity and that mindset to go that way if we didn't grow up in Bermuda with the background that we have? So for me, as I said, like, because I can't see my history as you can with your Nigerian history, I am looking at what am I getting from him? You know what I mean? The people that I do know, the people I can see, the people I can talk to.
One of the most important things, I've been waiting to ask you this question. Have you been to Africa?
Not yet.
This is the introduction you need to see for yourself. Because we can read books, we can listen to different people, but you must go yourself at one time. The Park Gambia, when you go to there, straight away, as soon as you go, welcome home, they'll tell you, brother.
Exactly.
They understand what some of our peoples have been through,
And this is the thing, like, this is the other thing I mean about people. Through my travels and, university and whatever, I've met so many people. Yeah. So I already know, even before, it was a big thing to say, oh, you have to go to Africa and see it yourself. Yeah. I was hearing from them, it's like, yo, it's not like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. I was hearing from them. I had like one of my friends that I went to university in Florida with, she's from Tanzania and she's Indian. And these are other things that I was like, wait, there's Indians in Africa? What's going on?
Well, when I went to Zanzibar, that's in Tanzania, and there's an Indian connection.
Right.
And obviously there's been Arabs there. And I mean, there's slavery also. He was taking the slaves across the Indian Ocean and stuff like that. Yeah. So, anyway. Yeah,
so it's one of those where, there's actually two people from Tanzania. One was black and the other was Indian. And it blew my mind, you know what I mean? Yeah. Because all I'd been hearing about Africa is poverty, famine.
Well, funny enough, you say about India. When I went to Kenya, I seen a lot of the hotels, the nice hotels. None of them were owned by Africans.
But that's, again, this is where
the Indians were hired up.
This is what I mean Asians, about the struggle of black peoples everywhere. It's the same. We were talking about.
Well, this is the thing of, like, nothing's unique in one place.
Exactly.
Because if we look, and you've got to look around, you've got to talk to people, like you said, you've met a lot of different people in your travels, and you have to speak to people. You have to, like, research yourself, and traveling is a big thing, and that's really opened up my mind. Meeting the most secludedest people that people didn't even know in their country that existed.
See, these are the things I one day I'm gonna try and tag along with you to one of them, because that's the type of thing. Like, I've always been curious about the world, because, as I said, you come from a really tiny place. All you can think about is what else is there. Yeah, you know what I mean. So there were any type of opportunity for me to go somewhere that's like not somewhere that I would normally go. Like, a couple years ago, a friend of mine, big up Verse, took me to Kosovo. It's
Kosovo, is that?
Yeah, it's Kosovo, but Kosovans don't call it Kosovo. They call it Kosovo.
Okay.
You know what I mean? These are, again, it's like a little thing that I just, I'm going to remember that, and I'm not going to call it by the name that the Serbians will call it. Okay. You see what I mean? Yeah. So I went there, and again, the struggle's the same. They don't look like me, but the struggle's the same. You know what I mean? And I would think I was I saw one other black person in the entire place, and cost of it hip hop is massive there. So all of these massive hip hop artists have been there. So these people's only understanding of other black people is hip hop. So he said to me real early, he's like, before we even met, he's like, look, there may be a point where somebody is gonna say, "Hey, nigga," and I'm like, okay, why would it's like, because all they know is hip hop. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, I get that.
Yeah.
So, but because, as I said, because I've traveled through a lot of places that didn't have a lot of other people, I'm already ready for, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And I know the difference between ignorance and assholery. Sorry. You know what I mean? I know the difference between the two.
Yep.
I've learned that really early. So when these people and I was like, yeah, whatever. I didn't think it would happen. Walking through this little mall and some little kid runs out. Hey! I was like, all right, cool. But he doesn't know any different, so I can't be mad at him for not knowing any different.
So if I can ask a last question now, we'll come near the end of the show. Where Jay Blades is today within Liverpool, and you've been here the last 14 years. From your experience being in Liverpool, as far as, like you said, you've been around where you grew up in 60% black people, been to America and different parts. Coming into Liverpool now, how do you see it? I mean, what you see the struggles are here, or is it unique?
As I said, it's not unique. It's the same struggle. It's, finding our own, if that's the case, if that's what you want to call it. There's, it's always been that. We've always been stuck in one little corner. You're over there, you can't come over here. That's all the same. So, but what I see that's different here than other cities, even in England, is that Liverpool people love Liverpool people. Doesn't matter what you look like.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Well, I'm happy you said that, but I don't come under that bracket. I'm about original people, whatever we are on the planet.
Right.
And I make that clear. And the whole point of me even doing these shows is based on original people who have counted around the world anyway. I wouldn't even be talking about these things if I didn't go out and venture out anyway. And also coming from the motherland, where I'm able to point to my lineage, Nigeria, and the location. So them things, these are the elements that I carry.
Yeah.
And I've tried to be best because I can clearly see that, there's been Liverpool is really behind, not just on even history.
Yeah.
I'm talking about it's just so simple, where how many black businesses do we have, where you can go get something to eat? How many bars or nightclubs? And it's not. I'm not saying we need nightclubs or something.
No, but
it's nice that they're there.
But taking that point, as I said, I mean, I'm an outsider. You know what I mean? So I look at things very much from a over here sort of perspective, and it's not different. You know what I mean? It's really not, and there are places, and there have always been places. However, they've never been, mainstream, big enough, and it's always our own community that shuns them mostly. In my experience of what I've seen, it's, we're not going over there anymore because that guy works there and we don't like him, or, oh yeah, that's where all the trouble starts, blah blah blah. All of those types of things. That's not new. That happened in Bermuda. That happened in Florida. That happened everywhere where I've lived. The same thing happens. So,
I mean, just even from talking to a lot of black people myself, I mean, because I probably talk about these kind of things nearly every day to different people who have them around that, and then majority can't deal with it, and that's when I've learned where, well, some of us are not built for this.
But that's the other
that's
thing.
That's just the way it is.
And again, that's something. Again, meeting as many people as I've met, I know that. You know what I mean? I've learned that over the years. There are people who are down for the struggle loudly. There are people who are down for the struggle just in view.
Yeah.
Outside of view, they're just like, I'm gonna be quiet. And then there are people who are just like, nah, I'm good. Don't talk to me about that black stuff.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's always that. I mean, as we say, people always forget, black people had to be involved in the transatlantic slave trade. So there's always that. There's always been that. There's always been
sellouts, what you call them, or people who will take the money or take
but that's what I
that.
always. It's one of the things that I always hold in the back of my mind is that we as black people try to think that we're all the same, and we're not. We really aren't. We're just like every other group of people on the planet. There are some of us who are there, some of us who are here, and some of us who are here. And the question is, what do you do with those people? Because I'm at a point where there's too much information freely available. If you don't know it now, you don't want to know it.
That's right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you don't want to know it, I'm gonna come at you in that way. Like, you don't want to know that? That's cool. We can still be cool.
Yeah.
We'll talk about other stuff.
That's right.
You know what I mean? If you're down for that, then that's what we talk about.
But that's easy. Yeah.
But that's one of the things I feel like like the experience I've had with black people, because I've been called not black enough by people in my own country. You know, I remember distinctly somebody saying to me, "Jeremy, you're not a brother." I'm like,
now you see what's interesting. Yeah, this is where it goes back to lineage. It's much easier. A Chinese person doesn't call himself yellow or something.
Yeah.
Yellow history. Indians say brown. Lineage is so important. So when someone throws that and says, you're not, then I'm going to have to bring me lineage on you. And if your lineage don't match, it isn't as powerful as my lineage because you don't know it, then I win. I'm sorry.
Exactly. And
and I don't even like playing that game.
But that's the thing.
You know what I mean?
And that's the thing.
Yeah,
it's like we've been stuck on this. Everybody's got to be this. And it's like, well, everybody's not that.
Yeah.
And if we really want if we want to use the word equality, then we have to stop deciding you have to be this to be black.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have to go and we have to go out and, throw up the fist and be out in the street.
Yeah.
I'm not that guy. If I'm honest with you, I'm not that guy. I'm the guy who's sitting in the white boardroom like, okay, this is what they're trying to do. And coming out and like, yo, this is what they're trying to do. We need to do this to circumvent that. That's me.
Of course.
I'm a spy. You know what I mean? That's what just giving myself up. But you know what I mean?
It.
Because of the situations I found myself in, things like Trump, things like, the people that we see in power here now, I could have, because I'm in some of them people's circles, like the school I went to in Florida, most of those people are probably Republican people. You know what I mean? So I still speak to them because we have a history. You know what I mean? We've been through things.
Yeah.
I might not agree with you. I might not agree with anything that you're saying, but we have a shared history that we did do things together, and we have our own little thing. So, we have to remember as black people that there is a lot of us, and we're not all the same. So if you try to approach me like, you need to be more like a Black Panther, well, I'm not like a Black Panther. I'm not that guy.
And our true roots anyway, we go back to nature. We don't. I mean, when we talk about, people say, "Oh, the streets now." Well, it was the savannah. It was the rainforest.
Yeah,
it was the mountainous areas.
And these are the things. Like I've noticed that we've been detached from that by whatever you want to call it. We've been detached from that. So, as I said, growing up in Bermuda, I was outside all the time because there was nothing to do inside at the time because, as I said, pre-internet. And so, we were out, we ran up and down, went to the beach and blah, 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 all these things. And I've missed those things. You know what I mean? And I miss those things for my son as well. It's because it created another little something inside me that I can still carry with me. But as I said, it gives me some sort of trouble every once in a while here, especially because I don't see the sun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
anyway, we're coming to the end of the show now, but I want to thank you very much, Jay Blade. Definitely, maybe I'll do this again sometime. Very interesting.
Yeah.
This is James DeBow discovering season 4, dedicated to original people on Liverpool Online. And thank you very much, Jay Blades. Enjoyed today.
Thank you, man. It's all good.
Interesting.
Nice. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.